Hey, welcome back to the Four Pillar Podcast. We stand for faith, family, fitness, and finance. And today we're talking about raising children, which I think is very, very important. And of course, it's me. And lastly, we have Matt, the Honey Badger, Gottemeyer in the studio today, and his amazing wife, Lisa. And so we are all parents, and we're kind of parents of different ages as well too, or different stages. So I think we could collaborate together a lot on how to raise children and the importance of it. And also, I think we talked about saying something about the family unit, which is sadly depreciating in America, which is sad because people don't even know if they have wee-wees or not. Essentially, at the end of the day, what gender they are. And I can maybe have my guy edit that out, but that was too aggressive. But okay. But anyway, so Matt asked a question about what does it mean to be a parent? What do you think it means to be a parent, Lisa?
I think it's the most important job that we're given, whether and then add in the aspect if you're a Christian, it's even more so. So it's kind of our job to teach our children how to be good humans in this world, how to be good Christians as well. So we can teach them by what we do in our own lives, how we model our lives, what we show them, and then just teaching them the basics of, how to be a good person in this world.
Right, which you could say the depreciation of society could even come from not being good parenting or done, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Because one thing I think about is like everybody's trying to like do all this drug stuff for adults and everything, which I'm not saying isn't essential, right? Mm-hmm. But where does the problem really at? It's in the family unit, it's in the household, it's with the kids. I'm not saying like all the adults that have all these problems are lost causes, but right, the way to fix a lot of this stuff, permanently fix it, especially in the future, is you got to fix the family unit and the kids being raised by people to have good values and have the correct direction in their life as well too.
Right. And it's even harder, I think, now because when they leave our house, like when they go to school or even just primary school or even college, a lot of times you have to combat what's going on in college because they don't follow the same, ideology that you have, or, teaching your kids the way, how to be a good Christian. So they go away to school and then they come home and you have to reteach everything. So your job never stops.
Right. And also too, right, there has to be a happy medium as well as letting obviously the child they have to develop their own personality and who they are and what they are and stuff like that.
Right.
So right, would you say there's a happy medium trying to like let obviously them develop who they are without inherently I think there's a big thing like in culture right now where it's like, you can per se, I guess, be whatever you want or whatever, and there's like no like per se boundaries, and if you put boundaries on it and then you're this kind of negative bad person. But ultimately, right, there's something between kind of, let's face it, extremely weird to just bad, bad things.
Right. Well, the thing in society now is to do whatever makes you happy.
Right.
And to live every moment on how you feel, when it used to be, I don't want to get too, we had roles to fill. Right. And now those have been completely abandoned, and it's just all about pleasure and happiness and your feelings.
Right.
Which is, like Lisa said, when the kids go to college, even if, you think you did a really good job raising your kids, when they leave your house, I mean, that can all change in weeks, months, years.
Absolutely. And I think the way that you parent and the different styles that you have change depending on their age as well. So it's more of guidance when they're older as opposed to, instilling in them, their beliefs and, who they are at their core when they're younger. Because you've done that all during their formative years. And then when they're older and they're adults, then you're trying to guide them more. Still as a parent, not as a friend, but it's more of a guidance than it is a leading.
Right. I think I've had a conversation about Matt with this as well as I've gotten older. Right. I mean, like with my dad now, essentially he's kind of like really not my parent anymore. He's become a potentially kind of mentor to almost almost more of a friend at this point because I'm a grown adult and obviously I seek him for advice on things. Right. I could talk to him about things, but essentially, he's raised me from point A to point B, and I'm my per se my own man now or whatever with my household and stuff like that I have to make my own decisions ultimately.
I'd be interested to see if he would say look at it the same way. Meaning if you ask I'm not really your dad anymore. I'm more of the mentor.
Right.
Because we went up to see my parents last weekend and my mom said something and I kind of snapped back at her. I said, Mom, I'm 46 years old. She goes, I'm still your mom. I mean, she's 70 something.
Yeah.
Like, and her meaning, I'm never going to lose that. I always, I'm exaggerating and I'm kidding, but my mom still checks to make sure I'm brushing my teeth every night and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Right. It's like, I know conversations we've had, Lisa's never going to lose that. I don't know what it's like to have adult kids yet, but I can't imagine that part ever.
That would be interesting. I should actually you should. Well, he may not give me an honest answer, but you should actually ask him.
I bet he would say he's my boy, and I'm looking out for him. And
right, maybe it's just a perspective from like I have, and I don't realize.
Right, because he doesn't discipline you anymore. He does. Right. You don't live in his house anymore. You don't. You're making your own decisions. You're making your own money. You feel more like an adult than a kid, but I'm sure he feels like the dad part never left him. You know what I mean?
It definitely doesn't. The way that you communicate with your kids changes, right? Because I'm not in a disciplinary role anymore with my young adult children, but I'm still their mom. I'm still going to try to guide them in the right way to go. I'm going to, give them my opinion. It's their choice to make the decision now. And hopefully they've learned from me in their growing up years, right from wrong and, how to make good decisions. But now it's definitely their choice now.
Yeah, I guess that'd be interesting too, because obviously I'm, my daughter's only 2.5, so you guys essentially have. Well, Lisa, yours are technically roughly, in the early 20s, and Matt, your kids are teenagers. So, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, when I get to that point when my daughter's a teenager or full grown, how I'm telling you right now how I feel about my dad is like when the roles flipped. Right. You know what I'm saying? When we get to that point. So
right. And I still think that at any age you can still model the right behavior, right? Because even of them as being young adults, I'm sure they still look to see how I react and how I deal with certain situations. So you never stop being.
Well, that's a very good point too. Because obviously, I see how my dad handled. What does I still observe how he handles things or deals with a problem or X.
Well, it doesn't even have to be a problem; just the way he carries himself through life.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
I read something a long time ago. I don't remember who wrote it or if it was what book it was, but they were talking about how childhood, even though it's a very small time of a person's life, is how important it is to set them up for the rest of their life. And they said the two most important things were, one, that they felt safe and protected. And then two is that they were having fun and they were happy. Right.
As their children, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To set them up for the rest of their life. And I mean, this was way before I even had kids, and I never stopped thinking about those two things. Right. But at the same time, I've always thought there's always a continual process as your kids get older. That's the topic of what we're talking about today, raising them to be adults. Mm-hmm. So that when they turn, now I know a lot of people now you don't even have to go to college. You could work, whatever. They stay at home, or after college, they come back home. Like when I was growing up, when I graduated high school, it was like, all right, we're done. And you're,
right.
So whenever that time comes for your kids, that you've equipped them with everything that they need to go out and make a life for themselves. So how do you, balance that, I guess?
Right.
Life, it can't be fun all the time, right? Because you have to teach them things, and they have to learn responsibilities and do things that they don't want to do. So I think it's part of it is knowing the time and place for both those things.
Absolutely, because there's a lot to be said about kids and play, right? Allow them to be kids, allow them to play. There's a lot of teaching that can happen, and play with them, right? There's so much that they can learn from that. But yeah, there's a time too when they have to have some responsibilities, and you just kind of gauge that. It's almost like you have to kind of gauge it per child as well. But definitely their younger years there should be some involvement in playing and enjoying being a kid.
Right. And as they get older,
you add
you know,
to
and
that.
on the flip side, it just can't be all they do is chores and homework, and
Exactly.
you're constantly yelling at them and pressuring them to get better at school and sports. And
exactly,
you know,
right.
Yeah. I think I observed it too. Like, obviously I'm not there yet with Eden. I mean, a little bit as far as, you know, as she's getting older, you know, obviously we're trying to really, you know, make sure she's playing. So that's, I think, what, like you're saying, it develops kids to make sure they're playing, and not just with a tablet. We don't even have a TV in our house right now. Right. So I mean, but we absolutely do not like tablets. I mean, she can have one, but like when she gets like 7th, 8th grade kind of thing. Cause I mean, that play, like physical play with toys, and outside and stuff, you know, develops the kids. But I mean, we're starting to see that, right? I was trying to potty train. You know, she's starting to like, how can I test mom and dad? Not listening to us, stuff like that. So we're starting to just the brink of kind of dealing with that.
Yeah. There's a lot of cognitive growth that happens with play as well.
And what have you guys found is the way to get the best response from her? For which part? Well, when she's challenging you, when she's not listening. You and I had a talk maybe a year ago about how you guys wanted, how you were never going to spank. Right. We were talking about kind of disciplinary methods. And I know, you know, she's a very young child and you're probably not doing right. What have you guys decided to do when she doesn't listen, when she challenges you? I actually changed my mind on that a little bit because of Jordan Peterson. But we, I mean, I think Kylie spanked her like once. Rob, I mean, it's been right. It's not like we beat her or anything. Unless I don't know what Kylie does all the time at home, but probably should edit that part out. Child service isn't listening.
Oh boy.
Okay. But I think just trying to talk to her to like, I think like what I've realized with kids, or at least with my daughter, is I think she understands like way more than we let on, especially when we go to like, she goes to grandparents' house, right? And then she's like, you know, throwing a fit about something, or, you know, not using her words to tell us she wants her to do something or whatever. And we like, you know, at home, she does, you know, we'll be like, hey, you got to use your words. What do you want? What's the matter? You know, she'll actually, you know, try to communicate with us versus, right. Grandparents are, oh, she's only 2.5 years old. She doesn't know what's going on. And like, no, she is way smarter than I mean, I think all kids are.
Kids are.
Yeah. They're working you, man. Yeah. They're working. She's working the grandparents. But I mean, really not giving in, and I think living up to your word, what you tell them. I'm trying to think. There was an example. I took her. I took her to the park. Or no, what was I doing? That wasn't the park. It was. I was doing something with her. I think it was even it was Danville Gym. I took her to work out with me one time to the Danville Gym, and she's like playing with like Crystal has a bunch of like balls and, you know, stuff over there, and you know, she starts throwing a fit because she wants to leave. And I was going to take her to the Dollar General to get a juice, right? Like anyway, I had a pre-plan, like I'm going to take her to get a juice. So I say, you know, she's like throwing a fit, hiding behind the treadmill, and I'm like, hey, you know, you gotta clean this up. You know, you're going to help Daddy put the balls back in this thing, and then if we do that, I'm going to get you a juice. And she's like, you know, still throwing a fit, and I was like, Eden, you're going to get spanked if you don't stop. And, you know, she eventually kind of whines a little bit or whatever. I'm like, let's go help Daddy pick this up. And she eventually, you know, goes over and she helps me put the stuff away. And, you know, I mean, she's 2.5 years old, so it's like, oh, she puts like one ball in the, but it's a principle. She puts something in, she's putting it back away. And then, I took her to get a juice and stuff like that. And then another time too, I was working and, she came up and she at home and she's like, hey, Dad, I want to build blocks or something like that. And I was working on during one of my work blocks, Matthew. But I was working on something. I had maybe about 15 minutes left, and I said, in 15 minutes. Obviously, she probably has no concept of what that means. But I said that I will play with you, but not right now. You got to give Daddy a couple minutes or 15 minutes. Of course, she came back like 3 or 4 times, like, hey, you done yet?
Yeah, right.
You done yet? But after I got that thing done that I was working on, I went and played blocks with her for like 20 minutes. Right. So I think telling a kid, I guess if that, I just answered your question, a really, really long answer.
Well, you said living up to your word.
Follow through.
You didn't
follow through is a good.
You didn't say give me 15 minutes, and when those were over, you said, "Oh, Daddy's got something else to do."
Right.
You did it.
Or on the punishment side, you don't start way up here and know I'm probably not going to do that, right? And tell them, if you don't do X, Y, Z, there's this huge punishment, whatever that is.
Yeah. If you threaten to spank and she doesn't do it and you don't spank, then she won.
Exactly.
Right.
So,
so if you're never going to do that in the first place.
Yeah, don't threaten it. Or don't say, I'm going to take your phone away for a year. No, full knowing you're not going to do that when you have a teenager, right? You say, I'm going to take it away for 2 weeks, something that you're going to for sure follow through on, and make sure that the punishment matches the crime, right? So if they do something big, there's a big punishment. If they do something small, it's a small punishment. And the follow through is huge because they'll learn that. If you don't, they'll be like, well, I can get over all the time.
Yeah, I don't mean to throw my parents and Kylie's parents under the bus, but the grandparents is
that's
bad.
A whole new level.
Yeah, and I'm going to say that could literally probably be a whole topic in itself. Is obviously you guys have to have dealt with grandparents. Not, I'm not saying they're not respecting what you want to do with your kids, but just you know what I'm saying. without
they get away with a lot more.
They do,
right?
Yeah, they're not the parents, so they're it's completely different. Which
and to some extent, I mean, it's okay, but if I think that's where we're kind of in the happy medium of what point if they're seeing the grandparents a whole bunch, right? Because if you live very close to their grandparents or whatever, and it's almost, or they're watching them every day or something, stuff like that. At some point, there has to be a happy medium.
Well, and I think that it changes then, right? Because now they're taking the place of kind of being parent at that point. If they're going to be watching your child for childcare, then they need to be on the same page that you are with discipline and raising them and things like that. So it's different.
What was your, Lisa, or you and Jason's, what was your discipline method? So
we didn't really agree on discipline, and I didn't get much say in discipline. But Jason, I wasn't around a lot when they were younger, so I didn't deal out a lot of the discipline I worked. But he used corporal punishment and exercise as punishment. So
what do you mean by you said corporal?
Spanking.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So
did he ever get into belts or spoons or anything?
Yeah.
Was it just spanking?
Whatever was nearby.
And how do you feel? I mean,
I don't mean to interrupt, but it's something too I've actually heard, and it's something my wife's done research on, that supposedly using a object is actually better.
That's what we were talking about.
Yeah, when spanking a child instead of your hand, because hands are for loving, and then obviously if you have a wooden spoon, you can't crack it over their head. I'm not saying that.
And I think if you're going to use an object, it should be an object that they know is a paddle. It shouldn't be a wooden spoon or a ruler or whatever's close by.
That's a very good
because wooden spoons are used for cooking and different things like that. So if we had a paddle, that that would have been fine. But I kind of agree with the hand thing. They can kind of get some miscommunication or whatever there. But I also feel like the punishment should follow the child, right? Because you could spank Chase all day long and she'd be like, all right, it was worth it. Bryce, he hated that. So you have to find out what works for your child. So Chase, if you raised your voice, she couldn't stand that, but you could spank her all day long.
How did you? I mean, you just said you didn't have a choice, but how did you feel about that? Did you
not having a choice?
No.
Oh,
the spoon or whatever it was.
I didn't.
The belt.
I did not like him using
idea
those
of
particular objects. Yeah, not that I'm not against spanking, but again, we had to use. I felt we needed to use what worked for the child, but just using whatever was nearby, a piece of a bed, whatever it
Piece
was.
of a bed.
Mm-hmm. And then using the exercise later on, I didn't like that.
That's just kind of weird.
That was weird. That was military.
Are you saying like doing push-ups for?
Do push-ups till he would say, tell them to do push-ups till I'm tired.
Till you're tired?
Till he was tired.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right.
This is really interesting. So, I mean, your kids are grown up. Do you feel like that had a negative impact or a traumatic impact on your kids?
Absolutely.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
The spanking.
Not so much the spanking, but the exercise part of it, like using that as a punishment. Chase has a really, she has a hard time with exercise.
Do you think that's why, reasons. Though?
It was early on, yeah.
Interesting. I just wonder how we've gotten. I mean, I feel like I know, right? It's just the way of our world. Everything continues to get softer and softer and softer, but now I've spanked each of my kids once.
I thought you were ready to say you spanked me, and I'm like,
I've spanked you more than once. And I hated it, and I never did it again. But admittedly, I don't know. I think if we still had a little more of that, kids these days might be
right. Yeah, spank. I don't see anything negative with spanking. Using all those different objects, I didn't like that. Like I said, if there was just a designated paddle for that and they knew that's what it was for, sure.
I think same thing with working out or exercise as well. You have to be careful with that because you're tying potentially a good habit with something bad at the end of the day as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there could maybe, I don't know. I think you just have to be careful with something like that. I per se maybe don't like that. Which I know, like when we're teaching kids jiu-jitsu classes, right? We don't have a lot of options because I assume there's probably going to be we're probably going to be shut down about 20 seconds if Matt and I start paddling kids during a jiu-jitsu class, which probably isn't.
Right, and I don't know how I feel about it at school and stuff like that.
Right, which is maybe not appropriate, whatever. But so we try to discipline kids in the jiu-jitsu class. We're not listening, so martial arts is discipline. So it's like, we can make them do push-ups or something like that. But still, even I almost don't even like doing that sometimes because it's like push-ups are good for you, right?
Well, and it's if you take it to an extreme too. Like when he would say, do push-ups till I get tired. And then he would walk away and he'd come back and they're crying on the floor and they're, they can't do it. Can't do another push-up, can't move. And he tells them to continue. That's just not.
See, I was probably about Casey's age when my dad decided I was going to start lifting weights every single day. And it wasn't a punishment, but I didn't want to do it every single day. I wanted to have, because, we sat down for dinner at the same time every night. I had to do homework and study every night. I did want like an hour to like be a kid, but that didn't make me hate working out. I mean, I know everybody's different, but maybe that's the difference is that you were using it as, or he was using it as
punishment.
Yeah. So I guess that we were getting onto the question here, whatever, as far as, how do you discipline your child? So, I mean, I actually like, if we had to kind of come to a conclusion on that certain subject right there with that, I actually really like what Lisa said. I've heard a lot. Kylie is really into the parenting books and stuff like that, or she does a lot of research on this, and she's brought a lot back to, picking it's what's good for your child, right? Is what you're saying. Like you said, you may spank your child or something. It may not bother them as much versus, raising your voice or a timeout or insert whatever other kind of thing. And that's kind of what I've gathered as well too. That I think even dealing with our grandparents or like my parents and her parents was like and it's like, because when we tell them, hey, we're trying to raise Eden this way, or we do this for this particular reason because we feel like this is the best thing for Eden, sometimes they almost get offended because it's like, you're saying my way of parenting is not good.
Right.
That's not what we're saying. We're saying every kid is special and is going to be parented different. Right. And we're just doing what we think is the best for Eden.
Exactly. Yep. Finding out what works for them, what works as a deterrent.
Yeah.
I'm torn on that. I don't know.
You're 50-50 on that?
Well, I mean, how far do you want to take the every kid is special thing?
Well, I mean, like, what do you mean by special?
Well, so special that they are above certain things, or do you just mean special like every kid responds differently to
Right? That's
Yes.
I should have.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's how I took it.
Right. Not that a kid is like too good to get spanked or too good to get a timeout, or it's just that
Right.
every kid has what Lisa was saying is unique in their own way, and
So it's just finding, because what's the ultimate goal, right? You want them to learn that there's a consequence for their actions.
Exactly.
right,
And if spanking didn't work and you keep on spanking, then it's like that insanity thing.
right,
You know, you keep doing the same thing and expecting different results.
Right.
right,
You know, but you tried this and you tried that. I mean, I remember when the kids were younger, I'd try talking to them. And Chrissy would always say, you know, you're talking to a 5-year-old. You can't really like reason with them.
I think you can. I mean, not
On
reason with
on
them,
how
but
deep of a level.
Mhm.
right. Yeah, I'm not maybe not deep of a level, but I think like what I'm saying. Like I have a like obviously very very not. I don't know how intellectual. I'm not saying the correct word.
Intellectually.
Intellectually, like it's right. It's not on a high intellectual level.
I mean,
But
you're right. They
I'm
do
having
understand
I'm
more
having
than
a
we think.
conversation with I'm having a
Right.
conversation with Eden at the end of the day.
Right.
Right. But if Eden was sitting here right now, how much of this is she comprehending?
Right.
You know what I mean?
right.
Like
yeah,
we have
not,
to talk
not
to
lot.
a kid
right,
at their level.
Mhm.
right,
And sometimes I would talk to her thinking, you know, that she understood where I was coming from. And Chris would be like, you just got to discipline and that be the end of it. Which I learned, you know, at certain times it wasn't so important to sit her down and talk to her about the reasons. And I shouldn't just use Meg, either of them, you know, why this was wrong and why you don't want to just go to your room for an hour and that's it, you know, because at a certain point they know what they're doing is wrong.
Mhm.
You don't have to.
I think there's probably a happy medium to that, right?
Right. And if you choose a discipline, a way of disciplining that doesn't do anything either, you know, like again, I'm going to use Chase because you would spank her and she'd be like, okay, I'm just going to do it again because that was worth
That's
it to
kind
me.
of the way Meg was.
Or if you send her to her room, the girl could stare at the wall and be happy, right? So that wasn't a deterrent for her either. So you had to find what worked.
Well, I remember one time, I mean, that's the only reason Meg ever got on the mats is because Chrissy and I decided that was a punishment for something.
Mm.
Chrissy was big on the timeouts. I always thought that was stupid. We'd take things away, blah, blah, blah. But one time she had this big sleepover with her cousin Haley and all her friends were going to be there. And she did something to her mom. And this killed me because she had been talking about it for like a month. I said, you're not going to that sleepover. And I had her that night and we didn't really talk much. And I felt like such an a-hole and felt like I broke her heart, whatever. But that's when it was like a light bulb went on. Like I finally found something that could hurt her. And that sounds awful to say.
It does. But
Right. But
yeah.
taking the tablet or the game, the timeout, whatever, I felt like my kids at least got over that in a second,
Mhm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
But she missed that party and then something clicked and it's like, okay, maybe I got to start thinking about the way I talk to my mom and treat her, you know, because that one stings. You know
Yeah,
what
I think when I was a kid, I was the same way. Like with like social gatherings with friends, that definitely.
That was a big.
And you can send me to my room. That's where I wanted to be.
Right.
I didn't want to be at the dinner table
Right.
with the rest of my family. I wanted to be alone. So go ahead, send me my room.
Right.
Yeah. Then I want to see what you guys think about this. So my dad, when he was a kid, he got in trouble. Or not a kid, he was like a teenager, roughly a teenager. Him and his brother both got in trouble. So so their parents, so my dad's mom and dad, my girl Mary and Grandpa Dave, they lived right down the road from my mom's parents, right? So like I mean literally like right down the road. And so my dad and his brother, I don't remember what they did or whatever, but they got in trouble. So my grandma, and like at this time, you know, like my dad's family, like none of them went to church, like, you know, like nothing to do with church. So his punishment was that he had to go to church for like 4 Sundays with, it would be my mom's parents or whatever, like Mr. and Mrs. Whitney, right at the time. And that was like his punishment. But to see the thing though is like he ended up joining the church at the end of the 4 weeks. And he actually wanted to get baptized and wanted to actually became part of the church. So like, right, kind of counterproductive, because I potentially could be really bad, because it could make someone really hate it. But I just thought that was interesting that it took a different spin.
Yeah, that does take a different spin. I went to a Christian high school, and a lot of kids got sent there that were, either going to go to juvenile hall or whatever. And I don't know if it was so much as a punishment or kind of like a last resort, trying to get them to change and be good people. But I don't know if that kind of falls along the same line. But I know that's why my parents sent us to Christian school. They didn't want us going down the path that we'd started to in public school. So
yeah, I mean, it definitely worked out in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it ended up we're all working out, but
right,
just it was
kind of
interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I thought this was a super interesting question. Obviously, I can't really answer this yet. But when your guys' kids got in trouble, did you bail your kids out of the trouble? Right?
I wrote that one for you.
For me,
yeah.
like based on right, Matt. What you're
like
saying?
Here's an example.
Yeah.
Right. We can do a kids my age or kids Lisa's age. It's Meg's responsibility to get something done for school. She totally neglects it. She's at school. She texts me, Dad, if I don't have this thing, I'm going to fail. Like, I can't think of a concrete example where something I could do, but like maybe she doesn't have supplies. So I can run to the store and I can run up to the school, give them to the secretary, and she can get them to Meg. Okay. And she's safe and she's going to be fine. Or say, sorry, honey, this was your responsibility. I can't help you. She gets the F, but hopefully she learns how important that was. Or like maybe a situation like Lisa's kid's age, maybe they miss a car payment and they're like, oh, can I borrow $300? Like, I know in her heart, same with mine, going to get those supplies, she just wants to make everything okay.
Right.
Save the kids. But there's something to be said for the kids feeling that pain of missing that car payment or whatever, and those consequences. And maybe they go, okay, this is why mom was always talking to me about being better with my money or saving, or why it's important to keep a job and not. But I think our tendency is to always want to save them, but are we being parents? Because they're not learning. We're just being friends, bailing them out.
And what's interesting, I actually took it from a different perspective. As far as I remember, one time I think I was like with a bully or something. I think I ended up like pushing the kid or punching the kid or something like that, and I got in trouble. And I don't remember, this is so long ago I can't even remember, but all the details. But essentially, I had to I don't remember, like it was like a lunch detention, or I had some sort of detention or something like after school, and my either it was like it might have been actually my grandma even at the time, like pretty much like pulled me out of school that day, or they basically let me skip school that day. I was supposed to serve this thing or whatever, because they you know what I'm saying, because they essentially like this, this isn't right, so they bailed me out and helped,
right.
I essentially, I guess, bailed me out and helped me per se at that. I remember too something, which I've had, what you're saying is too. I remember I forgot something at my house. This is a good example. So like, forget my seventh grade. I forget my girdle for football practice, right? I mean, they still had girdles when I played football, and like high school, like no one really cared. You could get like the fancy little spandex things that were comfortable. Like in 7th and 8th grade, like you had your equipment, like you had to have it and everything, and I knew like coach, because they carried your hip pads and stuff like that. I didn't have my hip, they're obviously gonna see I don't have it. So like I know like, hey, I'm gonna probably get in trouble or whatever that would be. So I remember, either my mom or my dad or something, I texted them. They ended up, bringing me the girdle. But I mean, essentially kind of what you're talking about. Yeah, what you're talking about.
Right.
What I thought you were going to say is that you got in trouble at school, and then your parents went up to the school to try to get this kid in trouble, or went to that kid's parents, which is another thing, not letting your kids fight their own battles, whether it's physical or whatever.
Right.
Like, in my case, growing up, my dad would have been like, well, then you better learn how to fight, you know, or, and My dad and I have had our back and forth, but one thing I'd never hold against my dad is him disciplining me.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I deserved it. You know, whatever he did, I deserved it.
Oh, and I realize
and
that
he
as
never
well
would have.
Yeah, right.
You know, these situations that we're all talking about, he never would have bailed me out ever. My mom would.
Right.
You know, because she's got that. But one of the best things she ever did for me was the day when I was in my early 20s, she said, I'm done. And I'm sorry for whatever the consequence of this is going to be, but you're going to learn from it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know.
And it's so hard. I'm still learning that. With young adults, it's really difficult. It changes. Like you said, missing the car payment or, you know, needing money for groceries or whatever.
Well, and going back to the beginning, the whole idea is probably by the time, and again, whatever time that is, that they go out on their own, they've got these things figured out. But, you know, like we were talking about the other day, legally 18's an adult, but early 20s,
yeah,
you're figuring it out
You're
at the very
figuring it
least,
out, yeah.
you know.
I call my kids adults in training.
Right. I mean, yeah, essentially they are.
It's not like you just wake up on the morning of your 18th birthday and you're just this.
You got it all figured out. You're ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a good question to end on is, what does success look like as a parent? I think we kind of talked about this earlier a little bit, essentially, but I guess ultimately, what would you consider someone having a successful parentship, if that's the correct way to say it? And you said also too, you said you never kind of stopped parenting. So,
right.
I mean, at some point, do you go like, I was this person, or I was a successful parent at some point?
Right. I mean, I think it goes back to, I don't know. I think character is really, really huge. Like, have they become good people? Do, you know, as Christians, are they Christians? Do they believe in Jesus? You know, are they eager to get out on their own and get a job and, you know, do the things that they need to do to be adults? You know, they're going to make mistakes. I mean, we still make mistakes, but, you know, do they feel safe enough to go out and do that? Do they feel comfortable entering the workforce and, I don't know, just, you know, taking on life by themselves? I think those are good indicators of being a successful parent.
That's why I would second that, as far as saying, like, if you have some sort of, I don't want to say metrics on your kids, but as far as, right, if you look at, you know, someone's child and they, you know, do they have just all the essentials, right? Do they have a place to live? Do they have a place to live? Do they have a job? Do they, you know, are they married? How do they treat their spouse? Do they have kids? Like, how do the kids? Do they go to church? Are they part of a church somewhere? Like, just all those essential things. What it defines to live I guess a productive life in society. And I would say if they are doing that, then obviously you probably were a successful parent.
Right. And that they're eager to have their own life, right? Because that's what you're training them to be. Like, as a parent, sometimes you're like, oh, I just love having them at home, you know, but and not that they hate you or hate being at home, but that they're, you know, they're like, I need to be on my own. I need to start my own life. So I think that's a good indicator also that they're ready.
I mean, you could look at the last, I mean, how do you feel? You had your son living with you. He got married and you've seen him once since his marriage, where you used to see him almost every single day.
Yeah.
And at least get to talk to him for 10, 15 minutes.
Right.
That's,
as a mom, that's hard, right? To let, you know, to let them go when they leave. But it also makes me think he's out, you know, living his life, and he and his wife are making their way. And when he does call me, it's, you know, we spend time catching up and talking, and it feels good.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming in, Lisa, and talking with us.
No problem.
This was all about raising kids. I think that was pretty awesome. I think there's a lot of good just tips or tricks or discussions there as well about how to raise your kids. So please follow us on YouTube, like us, subscribe us, whatever, on all the social medias or the Google Podcast or Apple Podcast, so you can get a little bingy thing every time we post a podcast. Make sure you take a selfie with Matt, because he loves that. And if you believe it, you can achieve it. And we'll see you in the gym soon. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.